So I brought B Corps to Canada. Where's Lee? Where did she go? There. I brought B Corps to Canada. We're at 2,200, so I am like putting out an official challenge. You can do this, right? Get those B Corps up. This is my life in logos, right? So it's very exciting. I'll go through this really quickly, and I speak quickly. And can you all understand my accent? Yes, brilliant. Okay, so my first degree is in criminology, degree in law, diploma in public affairs, postgraduate work in voluntary sector management, organizational development, and I'm currently studying to be a life coach. Fun, right? And I started off my career in the women's movement. I ran a rape crisis center. I worked at shelters for homeless women. I started the first shelter for homeless youth in the suburbs of Toronto. I had a startup, because how could I do this work without doing a startup? And interestingly enough, where's my good things person? Right there, it was to help nonprofits get on the internet. So way back then, and to help them figure out how to do fundraising using the internet. Then I ended up at Sick Kids, which is our big children's hospital, where I was the national child advocate for about 5 years. Then I've been at MARS, and MARS used to stand for Medical and Related Sciences. It doesn't stand for that anymore. It's just a name you can make fun of. And I could be your favorite Martian and all that other stuff. But actually, I forgot to tell you my big social innovation, which is 211. So the way you dial 000, is that right? For emergency in Australia. In Canada, you dial 911 or 411 for information, which meant when I looked at the available N11 numbers, 211 was available. And I thought, well, how do people access human service information? You know, like we don't know what level of government does what. Like if you have a driver's license, is that provincial, is it federal? What's going on there? In particular for new immigrants, this is really challenging. So came up with this idea of calling 211 for access to human service information. So you're looking for a nursing home for your mom, you don't know where to start, you need childcare, and often women are doing both, right? They're in the middle trying to figure this out. So it's available 24/7, it's multilingual, and it's now available to about 70% of Canadians. So if anybody wants to do something like that here in Australia, we can chat. So then I went to Sick Kids, then I went to MARS, and I'm running a program called Social Innovation Generation, trying to create a culture of continuous social innovation in Canada. My fellowship is with the McConnell Foundation and the Social Entrepreneur in Residence at the University of Waterloo, and that's why I've ended up here. And breathe. Okay, we're good? Okay, this is MARS. MARS is huge, 1.5 million square feet in the center of Toronto. It's right at a place called College and University. Across the street is Queen's Park, which is our provincial level of government, University of Toronto with about 90,000 students, and then Bay Street, which is where all the money is, and you always want to be located where all the money is. So we call ourselves a Convergence Innovation Center, nonprofit, not owned by any of those groups, but strong umbilical cords to all of them. So everybody feels welcome, but nobody can edge anybody else out. So it's a very interesting concept. The whole premise behind it is to commercialize research. So Australians and Canadians, tons of synergies. We're quite good researchers. We're quite brilliant universities that we've got all over the place. We're not so good at commercialization. So how do we get this from ideation into the bedside? So from this great work that we do to actually better health outcomes for Canadians and Australians. And the MARS building is where the first clinical trials for insulin took place. So this is the Banting and Best Institute, is right across the street from us. This is them. The desk of Banting is located at MARS. We had a huge history of discovery, and it's in an old hospital site, the Toronto General Hospital, and I know you guys have the similar things here up in Tonsley, right? And I'm gonna head up there and check that out as well. So it was supposed to be sold for condos because the board was doing their due diligence when this building was being renovated. They said, we're gonna turn it into, you know, a place where condos, why not? And Toronto does not need more condos. I'm just letting you know that right now. And so the guy called John Evans, one of our founders, a great civic entrepreneur, said, we can do so much better than that, and came up with this concept of convergence innovation. So placing intellectual property lawyers and scientists and researchers and academics and everybody all together so we could accelerate innovation. It was based on civic entrepreneurship. And what I'm going to tell you now is going to annoy you a little bit, and it's not common. He was able to put down $1 million of his own and got 15 friends to do the same. Wouldn't you wish you had friends like that? And so they said, okay, look at, We are putting our money where our mouth is. We believe that Canada can be better than what it is. And then they went to the provincial level of government, and then they went to the federal level of government, and all three of them were able to purchase the building and turn it into that, into that, right? So we bought the building about 2000, opened our doors in 2005, and I joined in 2007 when a group of foundations said, we think we can do not just technological innovation, but social innovation. So it's been a very interesting experimentation how we can blend those worlds. So right now, Mars wants to support innovators who achieve strong business results and make a positive difference in the world. We're done with the silos, right? We're really trying to figure out how to bring these things together because we believe the world is becoming much more blended. And in fact, it's that wonderful, messy, blended spaces where the excitement and the innovation is happening. We work in the areas of the future of health, energy and environment, finance and commerce, and work and learning. Because, you know, why not, right? Pick all the big challenges. And so I'm not quite sure what Adelaide is interested in the finance and commerce areas, but absolutely in health. Australia is one of the leaders in clinical research, in energy, and in work and learning. So we've all got to get ahead of this AI game and robotics and blockchain and not just wait for us to run over us, but figure out what does this mean for jobs and how do we get on top of it. So these are the kind of discussions that we're having at Mars and that I hope to have here. We think about not only the whole drivers of innovation, the supply and the demand, but we try to understand what are the barriers to the adoption of innovation? What is holding the existing system in place, and where can we intervene to make a change? So we're trying to think about things that are about, you know, how do we scale these kind of ventures, and if they're not scaling, why? And so this deck will absolutely be available, because I'm going to whip through it because I really want to have time for Q&A, okay? So this is some of the things that we're doing. We have a Center for Impact Investing. We've launched a social impact bond in health. It's around diabetes and hypertension and reduction in that space. We have a Catalyst Fund. It was seeded by the Virgin Unite guy. You might have met him. We have a task force on social finance and lots of other wonderful things happening in that space. We have a Solutions Lab, which is a safe place to tackle complex challenges using design thinking and systems thinking, and we do a lot in the green energy space. I'm sure you've all been inundated with hackathons, but they seem to be very trendy, and they're a really good way to get different folks together to begin to think differently about our challenges, which is what we need. SIG, trying to create a culture of continuous social innovation in Canada. We have a series of groups. One is a foundation, so strong culture of philanthropy. Mars, the University of Waterloo, they held an RFP for an academic partner, University of Waterloo won, and they set up the Waterloo Institute for Social Innovation and Resilience with a very clever WISER acronym. And Plan Institute, which works with people with disabilities in the western part of the country. Very different cultures, and we pulled all of these groups together to try to help us think differently about how we were going to tackle this huge challenge, and that was in 2007. So one of the things I'm trying to get my head around in this space is where were we and where can we go? Do I have a laser pointer on this by any chance? Yes? Got it? Or not. Anyway, play with me. Over here, traditional business, right? So in the good old days, or maybe not so good old days, you had a single bottom line. You had to maximize profit. End of story. Shareholder forget stakeholder. And your employees were a mean to an end. Okay, over here, we have traditional charities, 100% grant dependent. Please, government, give me a grant, write me a check, and go away, because I know what I'm doing. I don't really want your help. Oh, look what's happening now. There's pressure on both ends of that spectrum to think differently. It's harder to be 100% grant dependent, really, especially if you want to do something innovative and risk-taking. It's hard to get that funding. And if you need a social license to operate, you don't actually get to destroy the environment anymore. And even if you get away with it for a short period of time, in an era of transparency and accountability, we're going to find out about it. And also, I don't want to work for your company. So if you want to attract the best talent, and if you want to retain that talent, you better give me an opportunity to make an impact. And so what we see happening is pressure on both ends of this spectrum, both on the for-profit and the not-for-profit side, to achieve both this blended value space. That's where I work, in the messy middle. That's where the fun is. That's where the innovation is happening. And I don't know if you can see this, but I have cooperatives and mutuals running across because they certainly cover all of those kind of areas. So we can come back and talk about that, but can be really complicated too, you know? So like over here, you move to write a check to a charity, you move to CSR, you move to strategic CSR, you move to creating shared value. We can talk about all of this a bit later, but sort of a simple snapshot of where I think things are going. And now I've messed it up, so I can't advance it. Hello, people who can help me. So on the next slide. Okay, Bill Drayton, you guys know Ashoka? Anybody know Ashoka Foundation is this wonderful organization of social entrepreneurs? It's this great quote. Social entrepreneurs are not content just to give a fish or even to teach how to fish. They will not rest until they've revolutionized the fishing industry. Now there's a challenge for us, right? To think really differently about how we're doing this work. But it does cause us to think differently about how we see charity. Okay, I need you to advance. Okay, a quick story about Bitstrip. So at Mars, we have these guys come in, young guys, and they have created a new way to do animation. And they're like really interested in having maybe Disney or Pixar acquire them. And so, sorry, thank you so much. And so what we said is, okay, that's really terrific. And because we think about things through both a social and economic lens, we were asking them, you know, the kids would like this, right? Like, this is about creating, thank you so much. This is about creating avatars. That's kind of cool. You want to try it out in a school? Okay, so we find a teacher. The teacher tries it out, and right away, kids begin to tell stories of being bullied. This is completely non-threatening. Little avatar, I can play around with it. After a while, we begin to discover that boys in particular are using it to tell stories. It's a whole new level of creativity. Things are being unleashed in them. The teacher talks her school into buying a license, the school talks the board into buying a license, and eventually the province of Ontario buys a license for every kid. And they have these competitions on bullying, and these guys have a whole new market opportunity. They didn't even think, and this is for my friend at Flinders, they didn't even think they had a social impact. But only through looking at things through that lens did they have a new market opportunity. Oh, right, big win. And so then what happens? Well, Snapchat. Any Snapchatters in the group? Anybody want to admit that you Snapchat? I'll tell you why you Snapchat. I have a 19-year-old at university who won't talk to me unless I Snapchat him, right? So I have a Snapchat. And so guess what? These guys get really excited about what Bitstrips is doing. Purchase them for $100 million. Our dollars are similar. If this was in the US, it would be $1.50, but here the things are similar. And look what, I found a cute little avatar that I made of myself that says, "Good day, mate." Right? So this is the kind of thing that's happening there. That's on the for-profit side. On the nonprofit side, this is the Abilities Center. We all have abilities. We all have different levels of abilities. It's kind of language that we're beginning to see things differently. Instead of saying, you have a disability, actually we all have degrees of ability, so focusing that way. It's an amazingly inclusive facility. You can see it up there. And what they decided to do was scale. And of course, when you think scale, right away you think growth. And so they wanted to replicate all over the place, which means it's expensive. So using our social innovation lens, we talked to them about scale a little bit differently. You can scale out, which is greater numbers, or you can look at scaling up, which is impacting legislation or policy, or you can scale deep, which is about how do you change the culture about how we view persons with various levels of abilities. And we talked to them about this culture shift, and so now they work with the mainstream providers of health and fitness, like whatever, pick a gym, Good Life Gym, whatever is here, and they try to make their equipment much more accessible and make those facilities much more inclusive instead of the traditional approach, which is to scale by replication, which is expensive and challenging. So this is a social innovation lens on scaling. I'm happy to talk about that. The thing about the charitable sector, of course, we know it's changing profoundly as well, and I'll just have you look at that. If you're in the nonprofit sector, you don't just get away from talking about symptoms. It's important we alleviate suffering. We've got to have a focus on that, but we've also got to be thinking about solutions. Both are really, really necessary. Moving from fundraising to financing, you heard the discussion on social finance or impact investing, and a range of things that are happening there. I'm particularly interested in moving from these individual projects or organizations to multi-sectoral platforms. I think actually, despite what's happening, organizations are going to be on the decline, and new forms of engagement and working together are going to be on the rise. And it's because having those new groups come together to think about our challenges differently before we get to a place that we can think about our solutions, also a very exciting space. You heard about the language of sustainability instead of growth at all costs, moving from incremental change to systems change, and from everything being about the single niggly-piggly bottom line to true cost accounting. The thing is, things are happening very, very quickly. The very first line talks about the fact that it took 75 years for the telephone to reach 100 million users. And for the sake of just being a little bit crazy, Candy Crushers, any Candy Crushers in the room, took just a couple of weeks to reach 100 million users. The pace of change, how we can get to this place, is absolutely mind-blowing. And this is something that we have to keep in mind. A couple of quick slides on Canada and Australia. We have lots in common, and I think there's huge opportunities as mining declines in the agricultural area. And I just wanted to say a few things. We both have great talent. We're both great at attracting new immigrants, diverse, wonderful cities. I'm already in love with this city. Again, I talked about the great researchers, medium-sized countries, rich in natural resources, good education, but cost a lot of money for houses. Same with us, it's a little bit crazy. And then with democracies that spread the wealth a little bit unequally. So this is our challenge. Big countries, few people. Look what we're up against. And then this is our Prime Minister and yours. And Prime Minister Turnbull described us as cousins with long histories of working together. And really, they both believe in trade and that trade equals jobs. I wonder why they made a point of this, right? Say someone else maybe not believe this. And this is our Minister for International Trade, who calls us beacons of normalcy. And the reason I want to show you this slide, though, is that at this level, and this was a recent Canadian-Australian economic leadership forum, inclusive growth, progressive trade are terms that we're hearing at this level. It's a much more inclusive approach, and it's actually how they're trying to combat some of the challenges that we're hearing, well, certainly from our neighbors to the south, around protectionism, about trying to address some of the challenges that we're hearing globally. Now look at this cool thing. Google Trends, I did this just 2 nights ago. If you Google the word social innovation, Singapore comes up first in any kind of innovation. Someone will explain that to me one day, but I think it's something to do with guided democracy. But if you sort of take that for what it is, Canada's right up there and Australia's third. So people are Googling social innovation, and we think about, Google is the first to find out that the flu is coming this way because we're all Googling the kind of flu symptoms. Then this shows we're onto something kind of interesting, and we can really play with that as well. So here I am, your very honored and humble thinker in resident, trying to understand what is happening in this ecosystem, where the pipeline of these investment-ready deals may be, and then to create an enabling environment that really we all want to do good, and we all want to make money, and we want to have an impact, and both are good. Making money is not a bad thing, and having a social impact is not a bad thing. If we can bring those together, the world will be watching what we're doing. Thank you very much.